Welcome to a special episode from the IFBTA in our Meet Our Member series. And I'm really pleased today to introduce, and it's really not a real introduction as you get into it and you understand the conversation today, but to introduce Phil Crawford, who is the Global Head of Food and Beverage and Hospitality in Unified Commerce at Adyen. And Adyen is a global industry supporter member. So welcome, Phil.
Rob, always a pleasure. And my title is kind of a mouthful. I need to figure out a cool acronym or abbreviation because saying it doesn't roll off the tongue very fluidly anymore.
Well, I could tell you that you've had a number of titles over the years, which certainly doesn't imply a whole bunch of different jobs because you've been in the industry for quite a while. But this is sort of the first time, I think, that you've gone over to the supplier side because you've usually been on the operator side.
Yeah, for most of my professional career, I've been on the operator side for sure. Early days, like we go way back when I had a full set of hair and less gray, I was on the similar side on the hospitality and food and beverage technology side. So yes, it's been a long time since I've wore a different shirt, but I've also been on a different side of the desk. Let's put it that way.
There you go. Well, look, we'll get into that in a minute, but why don't we just start out with, who Adyen is and what your role is within the hospitality and food service industries. Where do you fit? Because I don't make the assumption everybody always knows, even though you guys seem to be everywhere.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Adyen is 16 years old. We're a Dutch-based company, but our brand name is not really known inside the United States or North America. Worldwide, we're very large and very impactful. So, in short, Adyen is a global fintech technology platform. It's a choice for leading businesses. Our customers include global enterprises such as Uber, Spotify, Microsoft, McDonald's. Our technology allows, in essence, customers to focus on their core business while they handle the increasingly complex payment landscape. It continues to change and evolve, and we're uniquely positioned because we bridge the gap between modern and fintech innovation, I'd say, and traditional banking grade reliability, which we have one seamless, trusted platform for global businesses, which really makes us unique.
But I think that there's a few key points, in this. First of all, I wouldn't want to lose fact that you're global because you may have started outside North America, but you're certainly global, which is very important because companies in our industry tend to expand globally very quickly. The second piece is about all of the payment platforms and things that are out there. It's probably one of the largest conversation points that I have with people about the confusion and how do you bring it together, but even more so, how do you stay on top of it?
Yeah. Look, I think with us, the fact that we're a single platform, right, and that we manage the entire payments lifecycle from the gateway to risk management to processing, issuing, acquiring, the list goes on and on and on, right? It enables our businesses to get paid, manage funds, issue cards, and streamline global, payments without relying on third parties. And that really is kind of the uniqueness, right? Our direct connections to local, international card and banking networks, is really a unique identifier to who we are, but also allows us to handle both in-store and online payment experiences. And I think that in and itself brings the ethos that we're faster transactions and greater reliability. And then because of that, in our embedded product financial suites, we offer a unique opportunity to unlock new revenue streams, loans, business accounts, cards, different products, and so forth, which is unique for the fintech space, especially for payments when you look at the overall business we try to serve, right? And I think the last part I like to just really touch on is, we're a full stack acquiring and banking solution provider, right? We do everything ourselves. We're not relying on anybody else. We do our own code and do our own stacks and so forth. And it allows us to create our own, uniform, but also allows us to create our own destiny, which is completely unique outside of the typical ecosystem.
Well, you sort of untangle, really the confusion and the mess that's there. But, you did say that you are a single source and a platform and a place that people can come to for all of the different pieces on this side.
Yep.
But you do have partnerships as well, because, in this world, you have partnerships with almost all the major POS providers. You have partnerships across the board, whether it's online or offline, whether it's online or on site, so those partnerships are important as well.
100%. Like we have a large partner ecosystem that allows us to, really kind of not even just scratch the surface, really go deep in our businesses and really kind of accommodate any kind of request that might come out there. And the other side of it is, since we are in tech stack, having our own APIs and integrations allow us to be more nimble and agile. For those of you that actually run your own proprietary systems, we're an easier hook in. Those that work through partnerships is another kind of great hook in. We have our own platform solutions. So there's quite a variety of ways that we can interact and intersect with the businesses and the customers we deal with, which makes us unique. We're not putting people into a box. We kind of putting them into their own individual ecosystem, however they want to work with us, which is unique.
Right. Well, you've been in the industry, as we talked about on the other side, for quite a while,
Yep.
and the industry's changing. And
Yeah.
so where we used to think that we were going to have those payment points and where we were connecting with our customers is really changing. And I think that that's also created the complexity because it's no longer somebody just coming right across from us and we have to go ahead and scan or run. It's now at table side, it's online. I mean, there's so many different places.
The mediums have changed, right? Like a long time ago, who would have thought your phone would have been a payment device besides everything else it does, not just a talk on it. But consumer interactions with us are changing, and we have to evolve and adapt with them. Whether it be a wallet, whether it be an alternative method, whether it be a local payment method, whether it be a credit card, like there's different ways that the businesses are interacting with their guests, and we have to meet them and how they want to be interacted with. Because those that don't offer the flexibility to a guest and how they want to pay, in essence, alienates themselves from doing business with that guest. And our ability to kind of cross that bridge and bring harmony between us and the merchants together and the customers really is a secret sauce that I think a lot of different payment providers can't do because of our experience. But to your point earlier, our global presence, we're seeing a lot of things outside of just North America. So our blinders aren't up. We're always wide open.
And we also, I guess I should have mentioned this, but it's not just cross borders internationally, it's cross borders by industry segments as well. I mean, you guys are very big into, retail, you're big into all areas of hospitality, food service, there's so many different segments and you don't know where food service, first of all, is going to end up or hospitality is going to end up, but you also can learn and sometimes those industries, they may influence us.
Yeah, look, I think you're seeing a lot of that cross pollination now, where you're seeing large retailers open up food and beverage inside their bricks, right? You're seeing food and beverage people start doing more retail. It's because the consumer, I think, paradigm is radically shifted. If I can keep somebody inside my building, but also offer them unique experiences, let's be honest, we're in the hospitality business, right? If I can keep them in the four walls, but also unique experiences that allows them to enjoy whatever they might be doing, eating or shopping, but also then cross pollinate it, such a uniqueness that it adds a lasting memory to the experience overall. And so starting to see this, like even look at hotels in themselves are really pushing higher end restaurants. So when you're a loyalty member, they're saying, hey, stay on property. You no longer need to leave because we're offering if not sometimes better than the restaurant down the way, which might be a single unit operator in or a chain. And again, I touched on retail, them doing it as well, offering coffee or pastries inside. So you don't have to actually leave. You can stay inside there, but kind of just enhancing the overall experience.
But you
A
know what?
lot of
The
that
the
on the
the
inside.
key terms this year, every year you look at what the key terms that the industry is speaking about. One of those key terms is frictionless.
Yeah.
Making it easy,
Yeah.
for the guest or the customer or the employee for that matter to use a system. And so having a single platform that works across, it should be intuitive of how the customers interact and use it.
Yeah, and frictionless goes in the technology, but it's also the experience, right? I think that's a broad term that actually can mean so many different things. If I have a very easable way to check out on a device and it's just a tap and go and I'm not fumbling with credit cards or different ways or using your watch to pay things, 100% you would adopt that because there is a certain part of the segment that wants to have that. No different than in a restaurant or a hotel where you want to actually not talk to somebody and use a kiosk. Great. We're checking via your phone. Great. You need to meet them where the merchant is. Excuse me. The merchant needs to meet them where the guest is because if you don't meet them there, you're going to create this friction. You're going to create this experience. It just isn't, hospitable and people are going to bail and do something else.
And hence the word platform in there, because
Yeah.
if you're using it as the example you just used, pay on your watch, pay on your phone, pay on a kiosk, pay at a drive through, right? Who knows, how this is going to be done. The transaction is actually where and when the transaction is going to occur, who knows? But I think that the resilience and thinking forward is really a key thing. And the operators don't need to be thinking about that.
No. And I think that's part of the experience we have, having such a global entity to look forward and see where the businesses are moving, number one, but outside the United States, but also abroad. But number two is like, what's next? Like, how do we build ecosystems that are flexible and agile enough that we can pull things in or pull things out on how the merchant and how the consumer want to interact, because we've all seen the places where everything is grab and go, never even actually have to pull your card out. Like, maybe that's the next wave. It's here. Maybe it catches on, maybe it doesn't. But we don't know what the future holds. So if we build our solutions and we build our product and our platforms that are flexible enough to meet and or exceed the ever changing environment. Let's talk about AI, the agentic AI. More and more people nowadays, and even our hospitality report showed it, are leveraging AI to plan everything from their entire trip, booking with AI, like purchasing via AI solutions. So like it's moving in a different direction. And if we had built such a stagnant, locked ecosystem where you can't do that, we would now be behind the curve instead of in front of the curve.
Well, in a couple of years, it'll be AI Rob talking to AI Phil, and we won't even have to, have this conversation in person there. So, who knows how that's going to be. But you know what? If you were to think about these experiences that you're having personally in here, working now with a global organization, multi-industry, but also spending all your time, because you have all the connections within the industry itself, what do you think are the key trends and focus, either that operators are thinking about or ones that they're not thinking about, but maybe they should because you're seeing it out there and both sides of the coin?
Yeah, specifically, I think for payment technology, right, it comes down to how there's going to, I think, reshape how guests interact with establishments. The rise of digital and contactless payments, like we just mentioned, is going there. The increased demand for self-service options, embedded payments and loyalty programs, I think is going to be one of the big next unlocks in the future. We're integrating payments directly into the loyalty programs and mobile apps to allow for seamless reward redemption and personalized offers. And then data driven personalization. I've talked about this probably till I'm green sometimes, but hyper personalization, right? The ability to leverage payment data to understand guest preferences,
Isn't that a back to the future kind of thing? I mean, if you think about it, how many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, everybody was saying, oh, I'm going to get that credit card data. It's
Yeah,
going to tell me who my customer is. Then the laws got in the way
of
and said,
course.
no, we can't give you that data. And now we're actually talking about getting that data again,
Yep.
because of, the way that all these different applications are sharing data and statistics and background.
Yeah, it's the old idea of opt in, right, versus opt out. And ensuring that PII and personalization and the different rules, country to country or sometimes now state to state don't get in the way. But you still have to think about hyper personalization as being like the next frontier. And really, I use the joke all the time about Minority Report, where you walk in and the screens change and you use biometrics to purchase, and your habits are all known about you. Like, as much as you and I are talking on our Zoom call here today, like, our devices are listening to us. That the insights we're buying and payments are all being correlated in back end systems, even automation in the way the processes, because that's how things are going. The more that we can actually share with our merchants and the merchants know about us, the more ability that, especially in digital, has done this in e-commerce, they get to know what your habits are. They get to know what your patterns are, what you like, what you dislike, and they kind of push you in certain directions,
Mm-hmm.
right or wrong, the way you think about it. But that's where the world's moving towards. The world's moving.
The interesting thing, though, is that you have I have used Minority Report as an example many times,
Yeah.
but when you think about the year that Minority Report came out
Yeah.
and what you're talking about now is saying just like on,
Mm-hmm.
sort of predicting the future in the wave, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or something like that because it shows up, in video and so we can visualize and see where it's going to be. Uh, but certainly all of these things are impacting what's going to happen in our industry going forward.
Sure.
What's going to happen with payment. You just mentioned the coming together and the integration of loyalty and how that's all going to work. Do you want to just maybe talk about that? Maybe not what exactly it is, but what the
Sure.
opportunity is for us.
Yeah, look, it really comes down to how do you harness payment data, right? And then transforming it into actionable insights. I think that the way I look at it is if I can get a unified data view on a single platform that consolidates all the online and in-store payment data, like then breaks down the silos, I have more informed decision making, right? Period. I have access to real-time reporting analytics. We talked about AI earlier. I have the ability to have AI do, based on algorithms, do forecasting more correctly. I have the information on data to do segmentation and personalization or operational optimization. Like, data is king. I think a long time ago, data was taken for granted. And because we had so much data, we didn't know what to do with it, right? But the insights from payment data alone can reveal a whole slew of information, whether it be operational from peak hours to popular menu items to efficient staffing, from a customer standpoint, whether it be segment offers based off a customer base, high spenders, frequent purchasers. Like all this information is flowing at our fingertips real time. The question is, how do we harness it, right? And the payment data really intrinsically valuable because it identifies those trends and analyze performance and actually analyze how your guests are interacting with you, but also other businesses. And taking not advantage of this data is a detriment to businesses. Yes, I think CRM data is great. I think CDP data is great, but you're only catching a subset of the merchants that have opted in for those solutions. If you have a way to monetize and capture all the data for all the different payment transactions that are coming into your business, it's a much larger data set, which then gives you more insights in general.
So how does Adyen specifically, because you have all these different pieces within a single ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
but then you do have the connections and partners also that are driving data in there. How do you actually, it's one thing to say you have all this data available. It's another thing to say, this is how we help our customers with the data we're collecting in order to be able to build their business and do business better and more effectively.
Yeah, I think for our standpoint, it's making it's now again, we're not sharing different merchants' data with each other. Where each individual merchant has their own data. So our ability is to get them back the data they need, right? In a format and they can actually consume, call it through webhooks, right? And then they can actually ability then to put it in their own data warehouse, their structured or unstructured data, however they want to actually utilize it. We're not giving them a dashboard per se that actually says, here's what we're telling you. We're allowing you to see all the different components of the data that we actually capture. And then we allow them, through our insights and through our actual views of other parts of the world, allow them to take the information, consume it, and then derive their own decisions. But additionally, there's also pattern recognition that you can look at in the insights as well. So whether it be through our queue with our merchants, and there's kind of like these like for like kind of scenarios, we can see trends and analysis and help our merchants how to decipher the data and what are the bits of golden nuggets inside the data sets that allow them then to take actionable insights. Really, it's about not us hostaging the data, meaning it's not us holding it for ransom. It's us being able to share it back to the individual merchants because it is their data on their payment cycle and helping them kind of build solutions where they can tailor it so they understand their guests more
The
holistically.
interesting thing about that, though, is when you start talking about the sharing of data and how people are going to use them, the
Mhm.
actionable insights, as you know very well, within an operation, you have different organizations that are using those insights, right? So you've got the marketing department for sure. You've got the IT department that's worried about, and we do need to talk about cybersecurity and some of the other things that
Yeah,
are there
yeah,
too. But you've got that department that's doing. Then you have operations that's trying to figure out what they're doing. And
yeah.
actually, you also mentioned, menu and pricing, which may come from procurement. So, how do you effectively? How does a company like Adyen, or do they just hire a guy like you that has come from the industry, right, that knows these different things? But how do they actually work and integrate and provide the right slices and dices for the various groups within your customer?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's our actual job to find that solution for our merchants. I think the idea is to kind of guide the merchants to tell them what their goals and objectives are. Every merchant may have a different objective, marketing wise, operational wise, cyber wise, technology wise. Our goal is to kind of check as many boxes as we can, but kind of help point them in the right direction of where the data might be telling them, or vice versa, allow them to take the data again, like I said earlier, and consume it and make their own destination and journeys because of it. We're only going to give you our purview, but at the end of the day, the businesses need to take the information and derive their own insights and derive their own kind of ethos of where they want to go in the future. I think if you look at what unified commerce does in general, and the fact that we centralize so many different parts of the ecosystem, whether it be like different touch points, online ordering, POS, kiosks, right? It eliminates the fragmentation and provides a holistic view of every transaction. I think that is the secret sauce because often you have organizations that have different processors or different data streams coming in. Going with a unified commerce stack like us, you can actually go ahead and consolidate it all and get one stream. So it's always consistent, and there is an actual, hallucination with the data or
And,
incorrect.
and the interesting thing is, I think I'm going to add unified commerce to one of those key terms that are being used this year as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
it means a
there's
lot.
there's a few of those. There's about three or four different types of terms. But let's go ahead and, you know, it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody in the last couple of days. We were talking about cybersecurity and we were talking about the threats there. And I was thinking about the old days, which the old days, by the way, aren't so long ago. So, you're going to recognize this. The people used to say that the CIO was the person to know, right?
Yeah.
CIO and know went together, and you'd throw those governance things out there and you'd talk about this or that. And what this person said to me, it changed my perspective, is that when they're sitting at the table with their peers, especially from marketing,
Mm-hmm.
they're really concerned right now about this. And so
Good.
they're bringing it up before they do. So they're not anymore the no, they're the person who provides the solution. So how are we handling those threats, or what should people be thinking about today, in this, or that not thinking about that ought to be handled?
Yeah, look, I think when it comes to cyber in general, it needs to be a topic at every board meeting and every single leadership discussion that transpires, because it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. Whether or not you're hit by a bad actor that's in your systems, or one that's actually trying to go after you with a larger, broad scale attack. I think the biggest part about it is, how do you react, right? What are you doing to help mitigate any kind of situation that occurs? Because a lot of this stuff becomes brand damaging, right? I think a lot of people forget about that. Like, oh, I'm going to go steal my customer data or my employee data. Yeah, well, that's actually bad. A lot of the damage from a marketing standpoint is the name, the association. Then obviously that gets out in the public space and people stop going to you as a business, and then, downstream we're hurting. I think from a payment standpoint, specifically when it comes to cyber, like, everybody talks about PCI. Nobody wants to talk about PCI, but PCI is there for a reason, right? Like, our level one compliance
Right.
service provider is huge. I think tokenization, right? We tokenize utility that replaces sensitive card data. Like, a lot of this stuff is basic block and tackling, but it needs to be in there, right? Additionally, we also look at patterns through AI fraud. We have a solution called Adyen Protect, sometimes also called Adyen. What's their name? We just call it Adyen Protect. Leave it at that. Like, that we actually have an AI fraud prevention module that leverages machine learning and global transaction data, right? We also figure out ways by utilizing solutions like hosted checkout pages to minimize data exposure. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually put yourself up from a payment specific standpoint that mitigate that risk. Because again, the threat actors are going to go after you, whatever glimpse they can get in payment data, customer data, employee data, that's still gold to them. So if you can cut down as many pillars as you possibly can, and I don't know, CISO used to say, as many bars and walls I can put up in between us and them, the better off we are. And I still believe that. But you also have to take the proper steps accordingly to make sure you're protected.
Well, certainly, as you're pointing out, there are so many ways. And so what your customers are looking for in that partnership that's there,
Mm-hmm.
they're looking for you to be proactive and also pointing these vulnerabilities out to them, you know,
100%.
including ways, that they ought to be thinking in the future. But the other thing is, nobody can ever keep on top of all of the new methods and all the different ways that people do things. And a lot of it comes from other industry experience.
Yeah. And look, that's why I said it's not a matter of if, but when. There's a lot of people that have been hit that have had people sitting inside their systems for years, just waiting for the time to activate. And again, I've worked for some amazing CISOs in my career, and I've learned a lot. And I'm not even. I think I'm good sometimes, but these guys are dangerous. Like, they know where to go and how to set things up, because the threat's always out there and it's always evolving and shifting. I've now read stories about AI doing automation complete attacks. Like,
Absolutely.
it's wild. So it's not some
The attack of the
teenager.
machines.
Yeah, it's not some teenager hacking on a computer trying to break into an exposed website. It's actual machines learning in real time how to go through and infiltrate, and then where to capture and where to go. So it's almost in a way, it's very scary, but it's also very relevant. So you need to kind
So
of
you know what?
be in
I'm
space.
now thinking about what the next presentation I do with a movie clip in it. It's
Yeah.
going to be war games.
Oh yeah.
Where the
Whopper.
computer is thinking about every scenario
Yeah.
that's possible and then testing them out until it gets to the one that breaks in.
Yeah.
And although that might have taken, hours and days at that time when that movie came out,
It's exactly.
today it probably could take an hour, minutes, to go figure it out if you're not properly protected. And if you don't have a platform that's going to go ahead and inform you that
Yeah.
that's going on.
Yeah. And our platform's incredibly advanced, right? I mean, It's our own platforms around the world. We're not running on anybody else's infrastructure. It's our own infrastructure. So the ability to be agile and shift and pivot in real time is incredibly important, especially when it comes to uptime, because without uptime, you're in trouble. So, and our ability then to share what we know about fraud prevention with our merchant keeps them safe, and in turn, it keeps us safe. Like, it's always trying to stay one step ahead as much as you possibly can, because again, like I said, the world is continuing to change and evolve, and we have to be on the pulse of how it's evolving.
So, with so many different types of payment types and preferences coming up, if we look forward to the next, I'm supposed to, think 3 to 5 years out. I can't think that far out because we
Can't
could
go
be
that far
talking
nowadays.
18 months, maybe three is even too long. But
Yeah.
what do you believe is going to be the change in payment preferences, as it comes towards, our consumers and I always recognize too that our employees are consumers as well. So
There.
sometimes they show us the way. But where do you see those short term and longer term shifts?
Like I think some of them I kind of touched on hyper personalization by data. I've talked about like tap to pay on mobile devices and mobility. I mean, I think additionally, like the increased adoption of alternative payment methods, buy now, pay later, or BNPL as we call it, digital wallets, crypto, still niche though for restaurants and hotels in essence.
Yeah,
But
there's a few have tried that, but they
yeah,
still haven't gotten it widely deployed.
they haven't figured out the secret sauce. But really, kind of think where it's going to go. More importantly, is ambiguous AI integration. I think is going to be more pervasive, not just in fraud prevention, but personalizing recommendations and pricing and so forth. But also the embedded finance of super apps. Like payments will increasingly be embedded with broader consumer expectations, such as loyalty apps, social media platforms. Like that's what's going to be here. The rise of these super apps for the many people have been overseas is like continuing to grow and be transform the industries in general they're involved in. I think those are going to be in the short term. But to your point a second ago, Rob, this is not 3 to 5 years out. We're talking 12 to 18 months. Like this stuff's on the precipice of coming into our lives.
Well, you never really know, right? And our industry doesn't necessarily lead the way. Somebody
No,
gets some unique payment method in some other industry, and then all of a sudden,
gotta have it.
the customers want us to take it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Adyen. Like again, we're in so many industries: retail, hotels, food and beverage, airlines. Like and the list goes on and on and on. So we're very well diversified, so we can actually see what's coming down the pipe, and that gives us a competitive advantage. So then we can build for the masses. We can build for all the industries when the time comes up. Like that's incredibly important. Or when the next payment methodology comes across and hits overseas or hits Southeast Asia, and all of a sudden comes into the United States, we can now be proactively ready to adopt that. So our merchants just go into our back offices and check a box, and they're on their way. Versus having to go through this terrible long onboarding process, which is arduous and tedious because their devices may not be able to support the next generation of payments. Our devices are trying to be built more future proof. Like, probably the best way to say it.
Well, listen, there's a lot of things that you brought up, in this conversation, and it's certainly some things that people need to think about
Yeah.
as well. But nobody knows everything, and there's always that aha moment,
Mhm.
and a surprise. So with all of your experience, I didn't say that you don't know everything, but maybe I don't know
I
everything,
don't know
so
everything.
I shouldn't include everybody. But
No.
with your experience, and then you went ahead and you made this switch, and you went
Yeah.
over to Adyen, and you took a look at this. Was there an aha moment or some surprises that came to you that you really had not thought about before?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of different things. Like first and foremost, I'm blessed for the opportunity to work on both sides of this table, as we've talked about. I think you've touched on a couple, but I think probably the two biggest part is to embrace unified commerce as a broader strategy. Like, just don't implement desperate systems to invest in a platform. Like, find one that connects, or find connects where your customers connect with you. That's a big, huge one. I think I've taken it for granted in the restaurant side because we were moving so quickly with COVID and different kind of technologies to get to market. We didn't have a holistic view. That's one thing, but also like prioritize the flexibility of payment options. The wider range of payment methods we can cater to, right, has a larger unlock for our consumer preferences. I think those are probably the two biggest things. I mean, outside of security, outside of investing in mobility and self-service technologies, like those are all cool things. But if you were to put like the overarching umbrella, keep those two things in mind because our world is rapidly shifting to the devices that all in our pockets that we wear. And as we get more and more of a digital world, we need to keep those things in mind. But again, we're also in the hospitality business, right? That we have certain parts of our segment of culture that want to talk to people, people that don't want to talk to people. But you need to keep the entirety of the unified, commerce strategy, and then obviously the flexible payment options as you go through and you start thinking about the different strategies
Well, I
moving.
think the unified strategy certainly helps us to the word frictionless. The
Yeah,
hyper personalization, I think, is very interesting
it is.
because we are going back to one marketing, but it's on demand, it's instantaneous. The unified platform that you're bringing up, I think really solves a lot of headaches,
Yep.
for the operators that they don't need to think about. And even though we might think about the boring side of this, which isn't so boring. I think people now understand that they need to have, you know, Adyen as their partner
Mm-hmm.
who's going to take that headache off of them, whether they're big or small, by the way, because you don't know how this is going to end up with your franchisees, with you,
I don't know.
global, you don't really know. And this is just such a complicated area. You need somebody ahead of the game on it.
Yeah, you definitely need an expert in your corner, right? Period. Because you may not be the 800-pound gorilla today as a merchant, but you might be there in the future. And it's a lot easier to go ahead and plan for the future now versus not planning for it at all. Because as you build out your architectures, your systems, your plan of attacks, and so forth, you need to always think longer term and scalable. Because I think a lot of people, are thinking about how do I get to where I want to get at the cheapest possible realm, but not looking that longer term approach kind of becomes a disadvantage. When you're there, now it's in your face, you're like, I kind of wish I could have, would have, should have in the past. You don't want to be in that situation ever.
But the good news is that in the old days, not so long ago, the franchisee franchisor environment created that additional level of complexity. Or how do you
Yeah.
convince somebody to go ahead and invest? I don't think they have those investment conversations anymore because actually
Well,
the payment platforms, which are now connected through the unified experience, is what is in fact bringing it together and helping to resolve the issue of, I can go buy this for $29
yeah.
here, and why am I spending it? I think that really helped to bring it together.
That there still needs to be, don't get me wrong, there still needs to be the rigor of franchisee franchisor relationship building for sure, but also sharing the wisdom and insights on both sides of that conversation. Because you're right, having that good relationship with your franchisees is incredibly important because they're all individual business owners. They want to see them succeed. If they succeed, you succeed kind of approach.
Well, listen, last question for you, because you really have been the driving force also between the relationship of the IFBTA and Adyen.
Yeah.
And, we always like to know from people. I mean, you have a lot of experience in the industry and you come from the ops side, and that's where we started as well. And, why the relationship with the IFBTA? Why was it important for our groups to get together?
Yeah, look, I think when I first took this opportunity, I believe I reached out to the IFPTA because of the experience you've had in the past, right? I think the number one catalyst is your shared vision and passion for innovation in the industry, right? There's no question about it that you guys are on the pulse of it all. You have discussions with collaborations of leading industry folks like myself, but also in general with payments and other providers. I think the industry focus is incredibly important. You're hyper focused on the value of platform to engage directly with a variety of folks, which typically is not the case. So many of us are kind of different disciplines and they're not entirely focused on it. You're also promoting like thought leadership, which I think is incredibly important nowadays, like to network with stakeholders and peers and so forth and gain insights and sharing. I think that's a lot of things that are missed with other organizations. It's the sharing opportunity with like-minded folks. It's not isolated. And that's a beauty part of what we're trying to do with you guys is get the word out there, but also share best practices and share insights and share, where we're seeing things going, because sharing is not only caring, like we all win if we share. If we keep anything under our cuffs, it's not, obviously IPP and proprietary, information, then nobody wins. So collectiveness is really an important part of the IPTA, which is why we joined you guys.
Well, we certainly appreciate the support, both personally of you as an industry leader and a thought leader, which is where we steal our ideas from, and or it's part of the conversation. Let's say that, but
Yeah.
also the input that you give to the industry and the place that you're holding, and also I think moving us forward in there as well. And the IFBTA certainly appreciates the support of Adyen as a global industry partner. and Phil Crawford, who's and we'll get this here, the global head of food and beverage and hospitality for Unified Commerce, which has been actually the conversation here. And Phil, thank you for your support and
Yeah.
for Adyen's support and for joining me today in this Meet Our Member conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Again, I appreciate all the time you've spent with us as we get these things off the ground. More importantly, I appreciate your friendship over the years as well. It's been a lot.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.